Welcome to this explainer. Okay, so today we have a really fascinating challenge ahead of us. We are going to take over 50 pages of incredibly dense modern academic theory, and we're going to distill it all down into a clear visual journey. If you've ever found yourself wondering exactly what the cutting edge of critical theory looks like today, but you didn't really want to wade through a mountain of academic jargon to find out, well, you are in exactly the right place. Let's dive in. So our source material for this explainer is the official book of abstracts for the upcoming Historical Materialism Athens 2025 conference. This is a massive global gathering of scholars who are all trying to map out the modern world. It acts as a direct window into what contemporary critical theorists are researching right this second. They're analyzing literally everything from global supply chains all the way down to the video games we play to unwind. Now, to be clear upfront, we aren't endorsing any of these viewpoints today. Our goal is just to impartially map out exactly what these scholars are arguing. To make sense of it all, we've organized this vast sea of academic material into 6 distinct battlegrounds. 1, organizing the Capitalocene. 2, the new faces of labor. 3, geopolitics and supply chains. 4, commodifying culture and self. 5, alternatives and resistance. And 6, theory in the 21st century. Let's start with Section 1, the Capitalocene, organizing the era. You've probably heard the term Anthropocene, right? People use it to describe how humans, as a species, have permanently impacted the Earth. Well, these researchers use a totally different term, the Capitalocene. It's a theoretical framework that links our modern ecological crises directly to the mechanisms of global capitalism and labor exploitation. Basically, the scholars argue that it's not just humanity in general changing the planet, but specifically the relentless engine of global capital accumulation. Section 2, new faces of labor, the shift in work. When we think of working-class labor, our minds usually jump straight to classic 20th century physical factory floors, right? Defined shifts, localized bargaining. But the abstracts highlight a massive tectonic shift toward 21st century precarious labor. Today's work looks incredibly different. We're talking remote surveillance, fragmented gig platforms, and the exhausting expectation of just constant digital connectivity. The physical assembly line has literally morphed into a digital one. And that brings us to a huge concept in these source texts, precarity. This is a state of existence defined by completely unpredictable and insecure employment. And the researchers make a point to say this isn't just about rideshare drivers or delivery gigs, it reaches deep into the professional and managerial classes. For instance, scholars note that modern university adjunct professors have been reduced to a totally precarious, divided labor force. One abstract calls them the intellectuale massa, a massive intellectual workforce that serves market imperatives with basically zero job security. To give you a concrete idea of what this looks like, one researcher presents a fascinating study on remote Portuguese call center interpreters. These folks are stationed in their own homes, working U.S. hours, and experiencing intense precarity through continuous video and phone surveillance. They are literally tethered to company computers for their entire shifts. It creates what feels like a digital panopticon right in the middle of their own living rooms. And you can see how this seamlessly builds into the next major concern, artificial intelligence. According to the conference abstracts, these scholars view AI as much more than just some cool technological leap. They analyze it as a deliberate corporate mechanism designed to eliminate living labor. By swapping out human workers with autonomous software for both repetitive and creative tasks, transnational corporations are cutting their costs and fundamentally altering what Marxists call the organic composition of capital, which is basically just academic speak for the ratio of machines to human workers. All right, Section 3, geopolitics and supply. Global choke points. Zooming out from the individual worker, the abstracts also analyze several massive geopolitical flashpoints to trace how global capital actually flows. They dig into the naval blockade in Yemen, the immense agricultural trade going on between Brazil and China, and the highly contested EU-Mercosur free trade agreement. And what connects all of these, according to the scholars, is that they brutally expose the vulnerabilities and the human labor costs that are hidden deep within our global supply chains. Take the naval blockade in Yemen, for example. How on earth could a blockade there be so globally effective? Well, the research points straight to the extreme consolidation of maritime capital. Over the past 3 decades, the shipping industry has experienced crazy gigantism. Today, just 3 giant alliances control a staggering 85% of all global shipping. This intense monopoly requires massive deepwater hub ports and highly centralized supply chains, which, ironically, opens the whole global system up to massive new vulnerabilities. Or look at another node in the supply chain, Brazil. In recent years, Brazil harvested an unbelievable 319.9 million tons of soy. To put that in perspective, 75% of that was exported directly to China, primarily just to feed livestock. The scholars argue that while plenty of economists will analyze the trade politics of this massive soy meat complex, they almost entirely ignore the actual labor relations on the ground. From the soy plantations to the transport systems to the slaughterhouses, it's that human labor that actually makes this massive scale of capital accumulation possible. Section 4. Commodifying culture, culture and self. Okay, this is absolutely one of the most fascinating takeaways from the conference. You might play cozy video games like Stardew Valley or Animal Crossing to relax, right? A little escape from the real world. Well, researchers argue these games actually just reproduce capitalist reality. While popular media constantly praises them for their mental health benefits, scholars argue their actual mechanics heavily mirror repetitive, Fordist-era material labor grinds, think 1920s assembly line work. They argue the games simply mask the exhausting anxieties of modern entrepreneurship beneath a really cute farming aesthetic. And this commodification extends inward, right into our very minds. The texts outline a psychological analysis arguing that our modern culture's absolute obsession with constant self-improvement and self-care actually creates a complete illusion of autonomy. According to this research, heavy modern economic pressures push us into constant self-surveillance and nonstop skill enhancement. We completely blur the lines between personal time and professional time, which ultimately transforms our own personal development into a commercial asset. The result? Deep, insidious forms of self-exploitation. Section 5. Alternatives and resistance, real-world action. Now, the scholars don't just critique, they highlight grassroots solutions to all this unemployment and exploitation. One major focus is the recovered factories movement. The process typically follows 3 distinct steps. First, the owners abandon the factory, usually under the guise of sudden bankruptcy. Second, the workers who are suddenly facing unpaid wages immediately step in and occupy the site. Finally, they recover the workplace by implementing grassroots, collective self-management so they can restart production entirely on their own terms. And the researchers are actively studying exactly how this plays out in the real world. They focus heavily on 2 examples. The VME Collective in Greece, which actually just celebrated its 11th anniversary of self-production, and the Kazova factory in Turkey, which unfortunately slowly dissolved a few years after it was occupied. By comparing these cases side by side, the scholars are trying to pinpoint exactly what factors allow these alternative worker-led spaces to actually survive against the crushing pressures of the broader capitalist market. But resistance isn't just happening on the factory floor. It's happening in education, too. This quote brilliantly hits on a core theme of the conference, bridging the gap between high-level academic theory and everyday working-class people. Scholars discussing Dundee's Marxist education structure note that they actively avoid just lecturing at people. Instead, they try to use imaginative learning to connect non-academic audiences with international movements. Their main argument? Deep historical knowledge makes everyday working people substantially stronger. Finally, Section 6, Theory in the 21st Century, Ecophysics. To make sense of everything we've talked about, we see scholars turning to incredibly interdisciplinary tools to test their theories. Take ecophysics, for example. This is basically viewing economic systems as highly complex networks subject to the actual rules of statistical physics. So some scholars use ecophysics to heavily critique popular degrowth strategies. They argue that simply slowing down economic production doesn't actually fix the structural contradictions of capitalism. Because the system has this inherent, unstoppable drive for accumulation, just trying to forcefully stabilize it actually creates more turbulent entropy or systemic chaos. Which leaves us with this final, overarching question from the conference materials. From intense AI surveillance inside our own homes, to massive global shipping monopolies, to the commodification of our very attempts to relax and play video games, the Capitalocene is just incredibly complex. The core debate for these scholars right now is whether theories built back in the 19th century can successfully be adapted to the hyper-technological, deeply interconnected, and precarious realities of today. It is a massive intellectual challenge, and as these abstracts clearly show, the research is vigorously ongoing. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope it leaves you with a lot to think about regarding the hidden structures shaping our modern world.